Hi, John. Thanks for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm Jon Sandles. I work for Anaplan. I'm based here in the UK in the north of England. And I guess I have some hobbies. I love soccer, football. I'm a big fan of Manchester United. I also love beer and craft beer. And I kind of like space as well. So I guess that's why I volunteered to have this chat.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge to find, I guess it's 1,840 people total from the beginning of the project to end to have a conversation with. But did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts to the moon again for the first time since 1972?
I didn't really. I mean, I knew that NASA was, there was some reinvestment and that they were trying to go back to the space program, but I didn't actually know they were trying to put someone on the moon. I didn't know that was, or on that timeline. So yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm kind of excited.
What do you think NASA should do to make more people aware of it?
Um, That's an interesting question. I mean, I think, these days, I think there's a lot of interest in NASA. You see everybody wearing the NASA logos, and as a brand, there's a lot of awareness, but I don't think people really know why they like that brand. I mean, for me, it goes back to, I guess, my childhood. I was born in 1970, and 1970 was a big year for space. And back then, it felt like, the moon landings was really important, and it was like it was the Cold War as well, and there was this kind of Russia USA thing going on, and everyone feared the Russians and everyone loved the Americans. I think the world has changed an awful lot since then. I mean, I don't think people quite have the same opinion of the USA as they did back then. But I think for that reason, it's really important that this is something that people can look to say, hey, this is the Western world. Again, getting back to their roots and really pushing forward, and that's good. That's a good thing. So I think that's one of the challenges. I'm sure is some of the political ways. People will say, well, why are they doing that? Why put all that money? Because I imagine it costs billions and billions and billions if the objective is to get on the moon. And I think people need to understand the broader context of why you would want to do that. There's a lot of innovation that will occur along the way, and it's a long time since anyone's been on the moon, so who knows what we're going to find when they get there again. And the world has changed as well, climate change and everything, so there's a lot of fear about what's going to happen to the world in the distant future. And I think things like going to the moon, it might seem crazy now, but these things might be really important to us at a certain point, so we've got to take all that into account. So I think maybe they need to do a better job on social media and stuff. I don't see much around from them. I know they do some stuff, and a lot. I see your stuff, so I kind of get some of it from you. But maybe there should be more investment in trying to kind of promote the stories. And I also I used to see a lot more from ex people who had been on kind of space missions and stuff, doing talks and stuff. And you still see a little bit of that, but maybe not so much. Maybe that's been caused by the pandemic and stuff. But there's some great people have some great stories about their careers at NASA, and they tend to turn that into very motivational stories. So yeah, I think there's a lot they can do to kind of just get people more engaged in it and understand more why they're doing it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you mentioned Anaplan, and I was just thinking back to Hub a few years ago. We had an astronaut as a keynote speaker.
Right. Yeah, and I before then at Cognos we had one over in Ottawa, one of the Canadian guys, and he was really good. It was really impressive. So yeah, more of that sort of stuff as well, because that's the sort of stuff that gets people to really understand the immensity of it all. So yeah. I mean, the other thing is that I get really interested in at the moment is just the use of space, so satellites and all of that. I don't think people realize quite how crazy it is out there right now in terms of people launching satellites, and they're all doing stuff. Some of it really interesting. And it's way, I just listened to a podcast recently about some guys who have effectively commoditized how you can build and send a satellite into space. You know, I think NASA, it probably costs in the tens of millions to put a satellite into space, but these guys are doing it for hundreds of thousands of dollars per launch, and that's pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing what you can then do with that satellite. You know, you can start mapping the world and taking photos, pretty high resolution photos of every single bit of the world. That's A, fascinating, and B, hugely scary as well.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, talking about satellites, SpaceX with their Starlink project of creating worldwide internet access just launched their 2000th satellite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the commercial spaceflight thing that's just starting now as well is, I guess that it's an opportunity for NASA to kind of get back to their, where the guys that do the really big things here, and get back to that, because I think some of that's it feels like, if you just look at it from a high level, it feels like the Russians have been doing lots over time, and I know NASA had some problems, I guess, with the space program, and that slowed them down a fair bit, I'm sure, and probably also changed the sentiment around it as well a bit. So there's, they're probably still a little bit on a need to kind of improve their net promoter score, from a commercial point of view, as to why do all of that, why take all those risks. It's a pretty risky business going into space.
Now, yeah, I mean, there's other space agencies in the world. You have the European Space Agency, China has a space agency, India does, Canada. I haven't really kept an eye out for it, but I really haven't seen as many people, grab onto those logos as they have like the NASA logo.
No, that's true. It's very true. I mean, for a while there was stuff going on in the UK, which, and then I think it became more of a European thing. And obviously now with Brexit, we're on our own again, I would imagine, in terms of that. So I don't really know what's going on in the UK, but you're right. I guess it's because they don't really go for the big flashy, we're doing this for the first time. I think, back probably, I think it was 20 years ago or something, or 10 years ago, there was the Mars rover thing that happened. But, that's not putting people on the moon. It's, it seems easy to throw a little satellite thing to Mars. And I know Mars is a long way away, but it just doesn't quite capture the imagination quite as much. And the Russians, they seem to be just doing, they do the International Space Station thing and all of that. That's been going on for so long. I think people even forget that it's happening. So there's that as well. I think the other thing that people do hear about is things like, the satellite cameras that we're putting out there and stuff. That's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's I had a train of thought, I just lost it. Sorry. We had the director of the European Space Agency come and talk here in Houston a few years ago, and I got to listen to him. And one of the things that he was clear on making sure we walked away with was that the European Space Agency is completely a completely separate, independent organization from the European Union, and the UK is very much still part of the European Space Agency. So anyway, thought you'd be interested in knowing that.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Good to know. Yeah, interesting. I'll try and find out what they're up to.
Whenever you hear that we're going back to the moon, what are the first things that come to your mind?
Literally, the first thing that comes to my mind is, the original moon landings, and there's this school of thought that it was all faked and everything, right? I always enjoy those conversations where people go, look at the shadows, they're all wrong. It's fascinating that people actually believe that it's possible that was faked. But it's kind of exciting because, I think one of the reasons people think it was faked because we didn't keep doing it, right? And if we'd kept doing it, it would have become just normal. So that's literally the first thing. It'd be like, finally, we can put to bed all the stories about that it was faked, and if we start doing it again, it won't seem quite so mysterious. But yeah, and I think just the other than that, it's just like nice to know that we're going back to that world where Team America are off and trying to do big, great, innovative things again. That's it's exciting.
I've talked to a few people who are Apollo deniers, and after probing kind of like the reasons, they always point to the quality of the photos, and at least that's one thing that should be greatly improved this time around.
Yeah, exactly. I think these days it's going to be much harder to fake it, right? So it's there would be too many ways that people could find out that it had been faked. So I don't think it's possible to fake it really anymore. But so it'll at least put to bed. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, there's what was that movie called that was out over Christmas? Don't Look Up.
Yeah, Don't Look Up.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of interesting that happened, and the way the interaction between the scientists and the media and stuff it was interesting how it really highlighted that tension. So it's going to be interesting to see how this journey gets covered by media and stuff. But all the more reason, I think, for NASA to have more of a presence, I guess, and they should be driving that narrative, not letting other people invent the narrative around it.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess whenever you think about the long-term future of humanity, what does it look like to you?
Well, it depends what you mean by long term, but I think long term it looks pretty grim to me from all the projections you can see around climate change. It doesn't look good. So I think that's the other reason that I'm hopeful when you hear things about the moon landings. It's like I can see, maybe not in 100 years, but in 200 or 300 years, we're either going to need some radical new sources of energy, or we're going to need to get off Earth pretty quick, because it's going to be a pretty grim place to live with the weather just becoming more and more unpredictable. So yeah, I think we have to explore that, and the moon itself may not be the solution, but being able to use the moon for something, minerals or whatever, or just the innovation of being able to regularly travel that far, we may need that, and we may need options around that. So I think it's an important step.
It's just kind of interesting how technology comes along and completely transforms our world.
Yeah.
I mean, like the automobile, the airplane, the internet, the computer. I mean, these are all technologies that didn't even exist 150 years ago.
And it does feel like that sort of revolution it all happened very quickly. It all happened in a very similar time frame. But in a way, it almost feels like we're hitting a bit of a brick wall because it all needs a lot of energy and it all needs a lot of power. So we do need to work out that balance about how we do those things. But if anything, maybe we can mine Bitcoin on the moon or something. I don't
know. Well, you talk about energy. The sun produces an enormous amount of energy, and if you look at how much energy it produces versus how much actually falls on the earth, I mean, that proportion is staggering.
Yeah, so I think that's probably going to be key to it in some way or other, being able to harness the sun in a more powerful way. I would think it would be part of our future, and that may, the moon may play a role in that.
Do you think at some point humanity will no longer be Earth-centric? Like, we'll actually expand beyond Earth to the point where Earth is just another place that people are?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's particularly anywhere near now, but I think maybe in 200, 300, 400 years time, maybe that's what will start happening.
And kind of going back to the airplane thing, I think if you told people back in the 1800s that you'd be able to wake up one morning, hop on a jet, and be halfway across the world for less than a week's worth of wages. They would have be, they'd be like, yeah, sure, that'll happen thousands of years from now or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's, these things, you just don't know quite when these pivots will happen. I mean, more immediately, I think, that just satellites seem to be the thing that's going to become the next big contentions point. It seems fair, it's loosely regulated at the moment. But yeah, it feels like that's going to be where the next big competition is around who owns space, effectively, the space around the Earth. And again, the moon may play a role in that as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of physical space, but since you have to go so fast to stay in orbit, it's like,
yeah,
it requires a lot of coordination, which we're really bad at doing on a continuous basis.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so a little imagination here. Imagine we do actually create like a billion or million person city on Mars, and your great granddaughter was actually born on Mars, lived her entire life on Mars, and is in high school doing a project on what Earth was like before we started really branching out into the rest of the solar system. What are some things you think would be good for her to include in her paper?
Well, I think the way we travel, because I think if that many people have made it to the moon, clearly the way we travel will have significantly evolved. So just talking about the way we travel, maybe right now we're in the middle of the pandemic, right? I think history will look on that in a interesting way that we probably don't even understand now. But a lot of the pandemic, in my opinion, a lot of the issues in the pandemic are to do with the fact that people can travel so quickly and move so quickly, and globalization type issues. So I think the pandemic would be a really interesting thing to talk to them about what happened, why it happened, and why we spent 3 years basically not being allowed to go anywhere. I think that will look, that's going to look like a very strange period, a bit like World War II or whatever, and it's going to be something that you would want to share with them. But I think some of the dangers of globalization. So I think it'll be a similar set of lessons I think will need to be learned if we're living on another planet, about how we need to be careful that we don't destroy both planets by letting too rapid transfer between the two with things like viruses. So I think that it's been very clear to me that you've been sat watching the way the restrictions occur, and everyone wearing masks, and then suddenly you can't travel anywhere, and then suddenly you can't get on a plane to another country. That's all been quite interesting to see, and it's been interesting to see how effective or not effective that has been, because there's always exceptions, and people still have still been able to travel, and the virus still spreads. So yeah, I think there's an awful lot where we're going to have learned when we look back on this, and some of it's to do with the way the world has changed so quickly, and we don't realize now how quickly these things can spread. Probably 50 or 60 years ago, the pandemic wouldn't have caught hold in the same way, and we would have been able to isolate it much more quickly. So yeah, there's a lot of lessons we should share and make sure we don't make the same mistakes.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think back whenever ships were the major way that people traveled between continents. It used to take weeks.
Right.
By the time you got to places, either everybody was sick or everybody was well.
Yeah, they all got it on the boat, and they either made it or they didn't.
And then, whenever they got to port, it was very easy to quarantine the entire boat. They were already living on the ship. You just need to give them some food and water, and you wait and see what you need to do.
Yeah. So I think that's very interesting. And it's also made a lot more people more aware of what they value, what things they value and stuff. So because you've not been allowed to travel, suddenly you're much more aware of the value of traveling, and what it means to you and what you get out of it and all of that. So it's I think that's been really interesting to see.
If it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see these people going on these first commercial flights and how they've but how it's affected them and how excited they seem to be, even though they were only there for I don't know how long number of minutes. But yeah, it must be amazing to be able to just look at the Earth and see it from up there. It must be just like, wow, there it is.
How far would you consider going? Just one of those suborbital trips that you were just referring to, or would you spend a couple
I
of
think
days
those would be good. I mean, I'm not sure I would go for days and weeks. If the end result was just to go to the moon, you get out there and go, well, there's not a lot to do here. So yeah, it depends. It depends what's at the other end, doesn't it? As to how far you would go.
You say you like football. Can you imagine playing soccer on the moon? Would that be something that you find like enticing?
Yeah, I mean, if there's this important universe tournament where England are playing and they have to play on the moon, then I'm going to go. I'll be there. Definitely.
Those would be some really high flips, I think they would do, and quite difficult to run.
Definitely be an interesting game. There goes the ball. Oh well. Oh. It's gone forever.
That's our fourth ball that we put in orbit.
Interesting problems to have.
Well, I know we covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I mean, I think I was going to ask you if you knew how much it was going to cost to land people on the moon. I don't know whether there's a number out there that it must be in the billions.
Well, we kind of have an idea that the Space Launch System with the Orion capsule that's going to be used to get 4 astronauts around the moon is going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion per launch.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have the actual vehicle that takes them from around the orbit of the moon down to the surface. And no really clear ideas on how much that's going to cost, but I'm sure that's in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah. It's interesting. So it's fascinating to know what NASA feels they're going to learn from it, and what the objectives are. I'm sure there's lots and lots of projects that they'd like to do on the moon. So I'm intrigued to find out what those are. But yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs and researchers and other people have gazillion ideas. If it was just a little cheaper and more accessible, you might be kind of.
Right. And do you know if any other space agencies are trying to? Is this going to cause a race, or there's suddenly the Russians going to say, "Well, we're going to the moon as well"?
Well, it's funny you say that. So China has been saying for nearly a decade now that they plan to put somebody on the moon in the middle of the 1930s. So like 1935. Right. Just a couple of weeks ago, they came out and said they want to move that up by 8 years to 2027. And right. I think with the delays in the American program, I think they see an opportunity here to maybe.
They may be able to sneak up.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Do you think it matters?
Well, that's kind of fun.
Do you think it matters whether or not China or the US gets there?
No, there's lots to do on the moon. I don't think it really matters who gets there first. But I think it's interesting if they're almost seeing it as a race. I always like a bit of competition, so that's good.
A side to cheer for.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Jon. And if you know anybody else that'd be willing to have a conversation about the future and their thoughts, I hope you'll send them my way.
I will, definitely. All right. Fantastic.
Okay. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.